The Atheist Debates Patreon Project presents a debate review of Matt Dillahunty versus Clinton Wilcox, Should We Have a Right to Die? So for this particular debate review, I'm not going to be going back and actually rewatching the debates. I'm not going to be pulling clips out. I might do that at a later time. I don't feel the need to really go through and kind of nitpick things that Clinton said. People have done that in comments, and we had what I thought was a pretty good discussion that exposed some of the things that I saw. I haven't caught every potential problem. And maybe in the future, if it becomes necessary or if there's a lot of questions about it, I will go through and address subtle points within the debate. But today I want to talk about how we got to this debate, my thoughts in preparing for it, and the key factor that seemed to be the primary point of disagreement, this contrast between a natural right and a legal right, and why I was willing to sit there and say I don't care about natural rights. Everything you say about natural rights is irrelevant. I didn't explain why during the debate. I have a reason for that too, but I definitely want to go through and explain that today. And maybe even Clinton will understand why I was dismissive there, because he seemed to be somewhat frustrated that I would just dismiss his argument out of hand. But I think I have a good reason. And I suspect that Clinton will acknowledge that while maybe it's a fairly technical thing, that it might be a good reason. So let's take a look at what preceded this debate, the interactions between Clinton and myself, and then get on to that discussion about natural rights. So when the Bible and Beer Consortium asked me if I wanted to do a debate, originally it was supposed to be in Austin against another apologist, but he really wanted to narrow the scope of the discussion to a position that I didn't hold. And when I clarified my position and how it was distinct, he was really no longer interested. Said he just didn't have time for debates. And so Ezra and the folks at Bible and Beer Consortium, who are amazing, by the way, I thoroughly enjoy doing the events with them in Dallas. I'm hoping to do some in Austin as well. He mentioned that Clinton Wilcox was going to be coming through Dallas, and would I be interested in coming up for a debate? And my first reaction was, well, what topic? Because Clinton and I have debated before, never in person, we'd never met, but we did debate on a podcast or radio show, the topic of abortion. And I'd already debated that topic against Christine Kruzlnicki at an atheist conference. And then the debate with Clinton was kind of a follow-up to that, because while Clinton is a theist, he tries to argue from a secular perspective. And so he went into the abortion debate that we'd previously had, relying wholly on secular arguments. He actually blogs for the secular anti-abortion, secular pro-choice, secular pro-life, something along those lines, that I've had dealings with in the past. And that was actually the initial debate that he had suggested we do again. I don't want to do that. I don't really feel the need of going against the same opponent on the same topic unless something new has happened. Granted, I've debated Blake several times. We've tried to subtly change the topic. The same is true for John Ferrer and others. But to just say, should we have a right to abortion? Should abortion be legal? Blah, blah, blah. I have a concern with the optics of this, of having two males arguing this subject. There are certainly incredibly qualified and well-spoken women who would be happy to have that debate. It doesn't mean I'm not good at it. I think I do a fairly good job of defending my position on that and the position of others, and the debate was well received. And I'm not remotely saying that men can't do this or shouldn't do this. I don't need to debate the same thing against the same person, especially when there are other people who might be better at it, bring a different perspective, and change the optics of this. So we went back and forth on subjects, and he'd mentioned briefly right to die, and I said, yeah, okay, should we have a right to die? I can do that, because I'm a strong supporter of a right to die. I think this is something that's fundamentally grounded in who we are. I don't even know how you could make a good case against it. And it's frustrating that it's not protected under the law everywhere. I realize it's a difficult subject and not everybody is going to agree, but also the implementation of it is potentially troubling. But that shouldn't stop us. We shouldn't just say, oh, this one's too hard. Let's just deny this to everybody. And, you know, it's a topic that I care about. And it was different. It wasn't just, you know, hey, let's do another God debate or whatever. So we agreed to do that. And then I set out to kind of do my prep work. How am I going to defend my position? And what am I anticipating from the opposition? So I've spoken in the past about how I prepare for debates. I probably will do, maybe I'll do a video just about preparing for debates. Maybe I'll just keep including the specific preparation for each debate. You guys can let me know what you think is going to be more useful, if there would be a debate prep 101 video, or if you think you get enough in the regular debate reviews. But I prepare in ways that may be different from other people. For example, I don't go look up what this individual that I'm debating has said on the topic, or at least I don't spend much time on that. I don't want to be preparing for the individual. I want to be preparing for the topic. And so the first thing is to settle on a topic. It can be a question, should we have a right to die? It can be a resolution, we have a right to die, and then you have your affirmative and negatives. But I never want to prepare for the person. So if I was doing a debate with, I don't know, Ken Ham or Kent Hovind or whoever, I wouldn't go out and watch everything they'd said on the topic, because they could show up and say something that isn't included in any of those previous discussions. Maybe they've got new arguments, maybe they've got new evidence. I know some of you are laughing right now, and I laugh a bit too, because we kind of understand that not much has changed. There's nothing new under the sun. And usually even if you hear something, it's just a modified version of something they've raised in the past. But my goal is to understand the topics, to have actually spent time considering them, and to have formed my own opinion, my own position on the issue, and to do the best job I can to defend it. And so instead of thinking about what this person has said, I try to argue against my own position. I spend a great deal of time doing it. I might do it while I'm driving. I might do it, while I'm have some TV show playing in the background mindlessly. At various times, it's okay. How would you argue against a right to die? And I also spend some time analyzing the topic. Is there a gotcha in the topic itself? Now, I don't do this because, so that I can use the gotcha. I don't want a technical win. I don't look at debates as a win-lose proposition. And I've mentioned before that the academic collegiate scored 4 points debates, they're not my style. I think there's value in them in teaching people the mechanics and perhaps the theatrics of debating, the do's and don'ts. But if we're actually having a conversation where we're trying to change people's minds, where we are actually interested in the other person's position and how it relates to our own, then I don't care about points. So my opening remarks for this particular debate stated my position and why I have that position. That yes, in fact, we should have a right to die. The simple foundation for this is that we should have every right, and then we should restrict those rights when we have compelling reasons that require us to prevent people from taking actions. You either have no rights until you start granting them, or you have every right until you start limiting them. Anything else is, at least reducible to those two positions. And I advocate on greater liberty, greater freedom. And as a practical matter, it's just simpler. If you begin with no rights, then you've got to make a list of everything do I have a right to wear this shirt? Oh, we could do a generic one. You have a right to wear whatever shirt you want. But then you find out that afterwards you come back and have to put in caveats. But you can't wear a shirt that has, this particular image or whatever somebody's trying to censor. I'm not in favor of that, by the way. It's just the example. But when I do the opening that way, what I want to do is list the potential objections ahead of time so that I can address them. And this serves two very clear purposes. Number one, it shows the audience that I actually have thought about this, that I've considered the opposition's potential positions. Doesn't mean that I'm going to get every single objection, but it shows that I've considered those, evaluated them. It also, number two, serves as a preemptive rebuttal. If I point out that this particular objection is answerable this way, and it has these problems, and it's not effective for these reasons, then when they get up to give their opening statement, some of what they say is already going to be rebutted. And we saw some of that in this debate here, where I mentioned, I want you to be on the lookout for slippery slope arguments, because that's the sort of responses that I found as I considered the topic. And now, this style of preemptive rebuttal is a useful tool that you do a lot. It is not cheating. I don't even know how you could really cheat in these discussions unless there was a rule of, you don't get to appeal to the Bible or science or whatever silly rule they might have made. It's not cheating. It is, here's my topic, here's my defense of it, here's the objections that I've already considered and rejected and why. And perhaps my opponent will have some new objections, or perhaps my opponent will point out why my responses to these objections aren't sound. That's still an option. I can say, hey, be prepared for slippery slopes. And my opponent can get up and say, hey, sometimes slippery slope's not a fallacy. And then we can have that discussion, which is also something that sort of happened here. They're going to do what they can to rehabilitate their position. And it may be the case that they come up with something new, or perhaps something that I didn't include or hadn't even considered. And that's what happened in this debate. And we spent a great deal of time talking past each other, although we managed to rein it in a little bit, when it comes to natural rights. And that's what I want to talk about next. So Clinton Wilcox argued basically from a position defending this idea of natural rights. What are natural rights? Well, that's the curious thing, because Clinton tends to argue from a secular perspective, and that's something that I can appreciate, because it seems to demonstrate that he knows that appealing to gods and holy books and supernatural or superstitious things, they're not going to carry any weight, and perhaps he understands that they shouldn't carry any weight. The problem is that if your positions are rooted in that, and you try to offer a secular justification for them, that's going to raise potential conflicts. Natural rights essentially assert that by our very nature, we have duties, we have certain liberties and rights. These are intrinsic products of who we are. Now, this sounds very similar to the way some of us would argue for secular morality. That the facts of reality are what dictate the consequences of our action. But that's about evaluating the consequences of our actions with respect to a goal of well-being or whatever it might be. That's not about rights. And when I first heard him start down this path of natural rights, I knew that this was going to be the thing that we probably spent the most time haggling back and forth about. And I also knew that it was completely irrelevant to the topic. This turned out to be a little frustrating, probably more so for Clinton, because I would just flatly say, I don't care about natural rights. I didn't explain why. And first I want to explain why I didn't explain, and then I want to actually explain why I don't care about them. I didn't explain because this could be viewed as attempting to win on a technicality. Now, I know I just talked about how I don't view debates as winning, but some people do. And the point here is that if I had explained this, people might go, oh, well, he is trying to win, based on some clever manipulations of language related to the topic and not actually on the merits, and we all know what's going on here. And so I avoided it. It wasn't relevant. All I pointed out was that I just had no interest in natural rights, because that's not what I was discussing. And as the person presenting the affirmative position of, yes, we should have a right to die, my opponent's pretty much forced to work with the case that I've presented. To present some other case or to rebut some other case is useless. So why is it that I don't care about natural rights? Well, first of all, I'm not convinced that there are any natural rights. I don't buy into this notion that caught up in our nature is a right to live, that this is a product of who we are in the world we live in. As a matter of fact, natural rights typically aren't even discussed from a secular perspective in the way that Clinton did it. It's very much, there's a recognition that a right is something that needs to be protected or ensured. And so the foundation for natural rights has been providence and God, and these sorts of abstract concepts that there's, or even perhaps karma, the idea that you're constantly being watched and the things that you're going to do in your life are going to come back and you're going to either reap your reward or suffer the consequences. Those sorts of things, they could be viewed as natural rights because there's something about nature that is working to guarantee. Now, maybe it's something about a supernatural agent working through nature to guarantee these rights, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And moreover, it's completely irrelevant to the topic because the topic was, should we have a right to die? And the inclusion of should, and the inclusion, that fundamentally sets up the topic as only applying to the sort of rights that we should guarantee. If you have a natural right to life, if you have a natural right to live, then there could never be a discussion about should you, because there's nothing you can do to change whether or not you have that natural right. Natural rights either exist or they don't. They're either true if you claim I have a natural right to sex. That's either accurate or it's not. Should doesn't enter the conversation at all. And so when we frame the conversation as should we have a right to die, can only really be talking about a legal right. Now, I'd previously had a debate with Abdu Murray. Should America be one nation under God? And we spent a great deal of time talking about rights in that debate, so I'm not going to rehash that conversation. I'll do a bit of debate review of that debate as well, and maybe we'll spend a little bit more time kind of analyzing rights there. But for this one, if we're going to say should we have a right, we have to be talking, as far as I can tell, about legal rights and what we can guarantee. This is about what we should do. Should we allow people to drive cars? Should we allow people of the same gender to marry? Should we allow people to decide when they want to end their life? Now, it's a complicated issue, and we talked about it in great deal, and I made the points right from the outset that I'm not advocating a simplistic, hey, if you want to kill yourself, go for it, because I think there are other factors that enter into this equation about whether or not we have a responsibility to each other, whether or not we have a responsibility to build a productive society. And we know for a fact that there are people who have attempted suicide and failed, who regretted that decision later. Their life went on to be better. We have to take that into consideration. But primarily, when we're talking about a right to die, we're talking about true end-of-life situations where someone's quality of life has diminished to the point that, from their perspective, continuing to live is less appealing than dying, that there's less value in it, that the bulk of their life may be miserable. And the only thing that we needed to do to demonstrate that we should, as humans, recognize, guarantee, and protect a right to die is to find a scenario where both of us agreed that that is the best course of action. And I think, we'll go back and look at it at another time when I do the review, but I'm pretty sure that on at least one occasion, and perhaps two occasions in the debate, Clinton acknowledged that there was a scenario where he might probably be okay with the idea that death could be viewed as preferential, or that he has these conflicts in his position where he fundamentally knows and wants to show empathy and wants to be compassionate and show that, yes, you have an individual there who's absolutely suffering, where we have seemingly no hope of any sort of improvement at all. And if they want to die, perhaps we could see it. Now, I had a number of examples that I hoped to use to get to see if we could drill down to exactly where he was going to draw the line. For example, one of them, and this is gruesome, I apologize in advance if the imagery is a little grotesque, but it was one I didn't get to and one that would be way down the line. You have someone who has been run over by a steamroller to, 60% of their body has been squished. Now, we have a pretty good understanding of the limits of what medicine can do. And if the person is sitting there screaming in anguish, saying, kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me, I can't take it anymore, we exercise compassion. And I think that you would be wholly justified, and that individual is wholly justified in wanting to end their life, and that this is the sort of right that we could guarantee. I brought up the idea that, we sometimes seem to do better by our pets than we do by our fellow humans. And to argue, as Clinton did, that this sort of Mother Teresa idea of suffering is good, it builds character. I double dog dare you to walk into a terminal cancer ward and tell everybody there, hey, this is character building. You shouldn't be thinking about dying. You should be thinking about the lessons you've learned from this terrible thing. And then to say it to their family too, because the people who are dying probably aren't going to have as much gumption to get irate and explain to you exactly how much of a jackass you're being and how insensitive you're being. Now, the foundation of all of this that Clinton built upon was essentially not a denial of a right to die, but the establishment of a duty to live. That there's something about natural law that imposes upon you a requirement, an expectation that you will live no matter what's going on, that you will fight to live because you need to learn a lesson. This is character building for you. Or you can't be absolutely certain about the future. Maybe you'll get healed tomorrow. Well, okay, maybe I will get healed tomorrow. Or maybe I'll just get worse. And which way is the evidence pointing? I don't think that there were very many people who weren't convinced already of Clinton's side, who found this debate to be the linchpin that, converted them to agree with his views, especially given the reaction of some of the folks in the audience. And that's the last thing that I want to talk about in this review. I'm not sure how well it came across on the recording because I haven't gone back to review it, but sitting up there having the debate with Clinton, there were some problems that came from the audience. And I understand this is a subject that many people are passionate about. There were individuals there friends of mine who'd lost a granddaughter. And there was one woman in the audience who, throughout the debate, continued to yell up at the stage. That is a very difficult situation. There's a part of me that wishes that the people in charge of the debate had asked her to calm down or leave. And there's a part of me that's glad that they didn't. These aren't collegiate scored debates. These aren't presidential debates where the moderator tells the audience beforehand, we will have one round of applause at the beginning of the debate and then silence until the end where we will have another round of applause. Which, by the way, doesn't work. If you watch the presidential debates, you understand that there are issues where people seemingly just can't help themselves but to react. And that happened a little bit in this debate. I regret that it happened because I don't want people to evaluate the merits of either case based on an audience reaction. Perhaps that audience was largely peopled with people who agreed with me. Perhaps it was mostly peopled with individuals who were in those situations or had family members who were in those situations. So the audience reaction can be biased. There's also the case where Clinton misspoke a few times. And I'm going to take him at his word that he misspoke and not that he was just trying to be a little revisionist after the fact. But it was clear that it was clear to me, or I'm willing to accept, that he wasn't intending to disparage homeless people. He was presenting a thought experiment about the consequences of allowing a right to die could, if you went right down that slippery slope, lead to these sorts of things. And how do you prevent those? And I think overall we did a pretty good job of addressing these slippery slope arguments. to say if you allow a right to die, what's to keep the government from going out and rounding up people that nobody seems to know or care about, like homeless people? That was Clinton's thought experiment, and people were outraged that he would consider homeless people as, expendable. The reason I bring this up is that I don't think Clinton remotely views homeless people as expendable. But there are people who do. And there are people who are suffering and nameless and ignored. And that's why there's groups like the Atheist Helping the Homeless and Humanists at Work, and a number of religious organizations working to help people in need like that. But I think the reaction from the audience, the disgust from the audience, brings home the strength of my response to these sort of slippery slope arguments. They're fanciful. They're not realistic. They don't represent who we are. The fact that if you allow a right to die, you can construct a slippery slope argument that it leads to this fictional scenario of rounding up the homeless and, curating their organs or whatever you wanted to do with them. That sort of argument is directly countered by the revulsion of the people in the room to the mere suggestion of it. The fact that you might have to implement some limits on a right to die doesn't mean that you should fundamentally deny a right to die. Oh, well, this is just too hard. How do we keep from going down this road? Well, first of all, I don't think we can go down that road. The response of the crowd lets us know that it's very unlikely. That when we start recognizing, guaranteeing, and protecting an individual's right to be sovereign over their life, including determining how they die, that we will implement it in such a fashion as we have in areas where it's legal, that takes into consideration the consent of the individual, their state of mind, the opinions of medical experts regarding their position, and that we would always work to oppose any sort of extension of this to just let's round up the people that nobody seemed to care about and we'll use them. It's not so much a dishonest rebuttal to my position as it is a fearful view that comes from the sort of arguments that I rebutted initially, that there's some fundamental sanctity in life, there's a natural right or a natural duty to live, and that if you're going to argue from a secular standpoint, you can't invoke a god or providence or karma or anything to support this natural right, which is why I was only talking about the legal rights. Those are the rights that I care about. You can tell me that we have a natural right to whatever you like. You have a natural right to never clip your toenails. Well, perhaps you do, perhaps you don't, but I only care whether there's a legal right, whether the governing body that I am a part of has recognized this as a right, guaranteed this as a right, and works to protect it as a right. That's why the debate title was, Should We Have a Right to Die? Because we're having a discussion about what we as human beings should be doing to make a better world. To come into that debate and say, oh, well, we shouldn't because we don't, because natural rights are primal, they're the foundation, you can't make legal rights that contradict natural rights. Well, that's bizarre. You absolutely, even if natural rights existed, could make legal rights that are in conflict with them. Those are the sorts of things we talk about a lot. That what should be, the individuals who are arguing for the better world are arguing for something kind of like natural rights, but not founded in some nature guarantees, protects, or dictates this. What we're talking about is what makes the world better. What rights should we guarantee to ensure that as we move through this world, we are increasing harm, decreasing good. I mean, I don't need to get into every view of morality and consequentialism and all these other things. At the end of the day, you have some rights guaranteed and protected, or you don't. And if you don't, and you think that there should be, you have to make a case for it. I believe I did that. I'm not convinced that Clinton presented anything that countered that. And his foundational argument of natural rights is wholly irrelevant. I didn't bring it up at the time, as I pointed out, because I didn't want to be accused of trying to get a technical win or having it viewed that way. But I thought that this would be a great opportunity to explain why I don't care what someone says are natural rights, why they were irrelevant to the subject of the debate. And once you toss those issues out, I'm not sure that there was much of a rebuttal to my position at all. And if you add in the fact that it seemed to be that he was recognizing that at least in some instances we could protect this right, I guess you could chalk it up as a win. But again, I'm not doing debates to chalk them up as a win. It's about discussing important issues, trying to figure out what the opposition is to those, trying to figure out what the best position should be. And as it stands right now, I remain convinced that I hold the best position on a right to die. That we should, as human beings, compassionate, humanist, and understanding the harsh realities of the world we live in, recognize individuals as sovereign over their own life, and guarantee and protect their right to responsibly determine when they want their life to end. The fear-mongering about massive, supporting every suicide and government rounding up the homeless, these are admissions of defeat. These are essentially claims, oh, this problem's so complex and so muddy that anything could happen. Cats and dogs could be living to each other. It'd just be terrifying. Yeah, it could be terrifying, but we're better than that. And the fact that we're having the discussion about this is proof positive that we're better than that. Are we going to get it all right the first time? Probably not. Maybe we won't even get it right the 1,000th time. But working towards that right answer is exactly what we should be doing.
This video is made possible by supporters of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You can find more information and add your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates.